The Veldari had spent roughly 12,000 years congratulating themselves on being the most evolved species in the known universe. This was, of course, before they bothered to look under the cosmic equivalent of the couch cushions. "Approaching the target system, Commander," announced the pilot as their research vessel, Indisputable Truth, sliced through the darkness between stars. The name was, much like the Veldari themselves, completely lacking in both subtlety and irony. Commander Thalia, resplendent in her silver-trimmed exploration uniform with enough medals to serve as lightweight body armor, leaned forward in her command chair. "Excellent. Prepare the science team for deployment once we achieve stable orbit." The Veldari Exploration Command had been mapping the spinward territories of the galaxy for the better part of 3 centuries, cataloguing thousands of planets with the excruciating thoroughness of bureaucrats with unlimited funding and no weekend plans. Each new world was painstakingly documented, filed, and forgotten, typically in that order. This particular star system had been designated XR 623, which said everything about the Veldari's flair for nomenclature. It contained 4 planets, 3 gas giants, and 1 rocky world that preliminary scans suggested might once have sustained life. Nothing particularly exciting by exploration standards, just another pin in the grand cosmic map that the Veldari were constructing to prove they'd been everywhere first. Chief Archaeologist Xerax floated into the command center, his gravitational stabilizers humming as they compensated for his gangly frame. The Veldari had evolved on a low-gravity world, resulting in their elongated limbs and pronounced craniums that housed what they considered, with absolutely no external verification, to be the most sophisticated brains in the universe. "Commander, I've reviewed the preliminary scans," Xerax announced, his voice carrying the weighty importance of someone who's practiced speaking authoritatively in front of mirrors. "I believe this expedition will finally provide conclusive evidence of the Veldari precedence theory." The Veldari precedence theory, for those fortunate enough to have never attended a Veldari cocktail party, was the widely accepted belief that the Veldari were the first and therefore objectively superior intelligent species to achieve spaceflight and galactic exploration. This theory conveniently ignored the mathematical improbability of such a claim in a universe containing trillions of stars and billions of potentially habitable planets. "Naturally," replied Thalia, with about as much enthusiasm as someone agreeing to listen to their neighbor's dream journal. "Though we should maintain scientific objectivity." Xerax's facial tendrils twitched, the Veldari equivalent of rolling one's eyes. "Objectivity is, of course, my primary concern, Commander, but the data consistently supports our hypotheses. 15,000 surveyed worlds and not a single trace of preceding technological civilization." Hovering nervously at the periphery of this conversation was junior scientist Kelb, whose official title might as well have been person who does all the actual work. Fresh from the Veldari Science Academy with credentials that would be impressive if anyone bothered to read them, Kelb had the unfortunate habit of asking questions that made his superiors uncomfortable. "What about the anomalous readings from the Northern Hemisphere?" Kelb ventured, his voice barely rising above the ambient hum of the ship's engines. "The mineral distribution patterns don't match natural formation processes." Xerax's head swiveled with the fluid grace of someone who's perfected the art of looking down on subordinates. "Tectonic activity and meteorite impacts can create unusual distribution patterns, junior scientist. I would have expected you to remember that from basic planetary geology." "Yes, Chief Archaeologist," Kelb replied, declining to mention that he had literally written his thesis on distinguishing natural from artificial planetary formations. "But the regular spacing and consistent depth suggest—" "We'll investigate all possibilities once we're on the surface," Commander Talia interrupted, displaying the diplomatic tact of someone who spent a career preventing academics from strangling each other. "Prepare the landing shuttles." The Indisputable Truth settled into orbit around XR 7623's lone rocky planet, which atmospheric analysis suggested had once possessed Earth-like conditions before some cataclysmic event stripped away most of its atmosphere. The planet's surface was now a barren wasteland of rust-colored plains and jagged mountain ranges, baked by radiation and scoured by dust storms that raged across its equatorial regions. "Preliminary landing site selected," announced the navigation officer. "Coordinates match the anomalous readings junior scientist Kelb identified." Xerax's tendrils twitched again, this time with the added flair of someone who's just been told their reserved table has been given to someone else. The descent to the planet's surface was uneventful if one discounts the 16 separate safety protocols that Commander Talia insisted on reviewing before departure. The landing shuttle touched down on a flat plain surrounded by eroded hillsides, the landscape stretching out in shades of ochre and burnt sienna beneath a pale, anemic sky. "Atmospheric suits secured," Talia announced as the team prepared to disembark. "Remember, we maintain communication at all times. Standard exploration protocol. Observe, document, and under no circumstances touch anything without proper analysis." This last directive was primarily aimed at Assistant Technician Vrel, who had achieved minor notoriety for accidentally activating an ancient irrigation system on a previous expedition, resulting in the only documented case of a Veldari exploration team having to be rescued while floating on improvised rafts. The team exited the shuttle in formation, their environmental suits gleaming in the dim sunlight. The first steps on a new world were always recorded for the official archives, though the footage was typically viewed only by insomniacs and government officials being punished for budgetary transgressions. "Initial readings confirm minimal atmospheric pressure," reported Kelb, scanning the horizon with undisguised enthusiasm. "Surface temperature at 47 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels elevated but within acceptable parameters for our shielding." Zirac swept his sensor pack in a wide arc, his movements carrying the theatrical gravitas of someone performing for an imaginary documentary crew. "No signs of macroscopic life forms. Microbial analysis pending." The exploration team spread out across the landing site, their instruments humming and chirping as they collected data on everything from soil composition to magnetic field variations. For the first hour, the operation proceeded with the choreographed precision of a well-rehearsed ballet, if ballets involved a lot of dirt sampling and disappointed sighs. And then Kelb wandered over the crest of a small ridge and promptly forgot how to breathe. "Chief Archaeologist," he called, his voice cracking through the communication system. "Commander, I think you should see this." Zirax arrived first, his long strides covering ground quickly despite the cumbersome environmental suit. "What is it, junior scientist? If this is another unusual rock formation, I must remind you that not every natural phenomenon requires a committee meeting." Kelp simply pointed toward the valley beyond the ridge. Stretching before them, half buried in dust and partially collapsed from millennia of exposure, was a structure. Not a natural formation, not a trick of light and shadow, but an unmistakably artificial structure with straight lines and geometric precision that nature simply does not produce without significant encouragement. "Thanks," Zirax began, then stopped, his normally verbose commentary failing him for perhaps the first time in his distinguished career. Commander Thalia crested the ridge, took one look at the scene, and demonstrated her leadership abilities by articulating what everyone was thinking. Well, shit. The structure stretched for nearly a kilometer, its design suggesting a complex of interconnected buildings arranged in concentric circles. Most was buried beneath centuries of accumulated dust, but sections protruded from the ground like the exposed bones of some enormous skeleton. The material appeared to be a metallic alloy of some kind, its surface pitted and oxidized, but still recognizably manufactured. "This can't be possible," Zirax whispered, his sensor pack dropping limply to his side. "There's no record of any Veldari expedition to this system. No colony was ever established here." "I don't think it's Veldari," Kelb said quietly, already moving down the slope toward the structure. "The architectural style doesn't match any known Veldari design principles." "Don't be absurd," Zyrex snapped, following after him with the frantic energy of someone whose worldview is crumbling in real time. "If not Veldari, then what? Some heretofore undiscovered spacefaring species that conveniently left no other trace of their existence anywhere else in the galaxy?" Commander Talio, demonstrating the cool head that had earned her command of the expedition, began issuing orders to the rest of the team. "Set up a perimeter. I want continuous scans and documentation. Nobody enters the structure until we've conducted a thorough external analysis." The team descended upon the site with the chaotic enthusiasm of children discovering an abandoned amusement park, all previous protocols temporarily forgotten. Scanning devices hummed, sample collectors whirred, and academics bickered. The universal soundtrack of scientific discovery. "The metal composition is unlike anything in our database," reported the materials specialist, a diminutive Veldari named Plex, whose enthusiasm for alloys bordered on the concerning. "It contains elements we recognize, but the manufacturing technique, I've never seen anything like it." Kelb had made his way to what appeared to be an entrance, a rectangular opening partially obscured by debris. His scanner revealed a corridor beyond, stretching into darkness. "Commander," he called, "I believe I've found a way inside." Talia joined him, her normally stern expression replaced by poorly concealed excitement. "Remember protocols, junior scientist? We don't enter until safety is confirmed." "Of course, Commander," Kelber replied, already extending a remote probe into the opening. The device hovered forward, its lights illuminating the corridor beyond. The team gathered around the display screen, watching as the probe transmitted images of the interior. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling supported by columns that curved gracefully upward. The walls were lined with what appeared to be control panels or interfaces of some kind, their surfaces dark and lifeless. In the center of the room stood a raised platform, upon which rested what could only be described as a chair, albeit one designed for a body configuration markedly different from Veldari physiology. "It's a control room," breathed Alia. "A command center of some kind." Zyrax had fallen uncharacteristically silent, his eyes fixed on the display as the probe continued its survey. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual pompous certainty. "We need to date this structure." Immediately, samples were collected, analyzed, and reanalyzed as the Veldari struggled to accept the results their instruments were reporting. The silence that fell over the team as the dating process completed was profound enough to qualify as a religious experience. "That can't be right," Zyrax finally said, his voice hollow. "Run it again." The materials specialist did so, her tendrils twitching nervously. "The results are consistent, Chief Archaeologist. The structure dates to approximately 750000 years ago, with a margin of error of plus or minus 5,000 years. The implications crashed down upon the team like a collapsing star. The Veldari civilization was approximately 1500 years old. Their spacefaring technology dated back a mere 3,000 years. This structure was older than their entire species. There must be some contamination in the samples, Zyrax insisted, his voice rising. "Some factor we're not accounting for in the analysis." "We've run the tests 3 times, the specialist replied quietly. "Using different samples and methodologies, the results are consistent." Commander Thalia, practical to the core, had already moved past the initial shock and was considering the implications. "We need to explore the interior. Whatever civilization built this, they achieved spaceflight hundreds of thousands of years before us. The technological insights could be invaluable." Kelb, who had been examining the probe's footage with intense concentration, suddenly straightened. "Commander, look at this." He pointed to a section of wall partially illuminated by the probe's lights. "There are markings. Symbols of some kind." The probe was directed to capture higher resolution images of the area Kelb had indicated. The symbols were unlike any writing system the Veldari had encountered. Angular glyphs arranged in horizontal lines. "Can we translate this?" Thaddeus asked, turning to the team's linguistics specialist. "Not without more samples and context," the linguist replied. "But I can tell you one thing, it's not random. These are definitely language symbols, arranged systematically." "I want a full exploration team prepared to enter the structure," Tali decided. "Maximum safety protocols, we document everything." As the team prepared for entry, Kelb found himself standing beside Zyrax at the perimeter, both staring at the ancient structure stretching before them. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Kelb said quietly. Zyrax's tendrils drooped slightly, a rare display of vulnerability from the normally rigid archaeologist. "If these findings are verified, yes. The Veldari precedence theory would be definitively disproven." "Isn't that exciting, though," Kelb ventured, "to discover we're not alone in the universe's history, that someone else walked this path before us?" Zyrax turned to look at his junior colleague, his expression unreadable behind his environmental suit's visor. "The precedence theory has been the foundation of our cultural identity for generations, junior scientist. Our perceived uniqueness has driven our expansion, our scientific advancement, our entire civilization's purpose. What happens when that foundation crumbles?" Before Kelb could respond, Commander Thalia's voice cut through their communications. "Exploration team assembled. We proceeding with interior examination." The entry into the ancient structure proceeded with painstaking caution. Every step was documented, every surface scanned, every potential hazard evaluated before being approached. The main chamber was even more impressive in person than it had appeared via the probe's footage. A vast space designed with both aesthetic beauty and functional purpose. "These control interfaces," murmured the technology specialist, examining one of the wall panels. "They're designed for manual operation. Physical contact. Can you determine their function? Talia asked. Not without activating them, which I strongly advise against, the specialist replied. But based on the layout and configuration, this appears to be a planetary monitoring station of some kind. Environmental controls, perhaps. Kelb had made his way to the central platform, studying the chair-like structure with fascination. Commander, look at these proportions. The being that sat here, they were smaller than us, more compact, bilateral symmetry, but with different articulation points. As the team continued their exploration, moving deeper into the complex, they discovered more rooms, what appeared to be living quarters, storage facilities, and workshops. Each new discovery pointed to the same conclusion. This had been a permanently inhabited outpost, maintained by beings physiologically different from the Veldari, possessing technology far beyond what the Veldari had achieved even now. In what appeared to be a data storage room, the team made their most significant discovery. A sealed container, miraculously preserved, containing what the technology specialist identified as information storage devices. Can we access the data? Talia asked, her voice tense with excitement. Not with our current equipment, the specialist admitted. But if we can transport these back to the ship, perhaps even back to the Central Science Authority, maybe. As the team prepared to extract the storage devices, Kelb noticed something on the wall of the room, a faded image, partially preserved. He directed his light toward it, focusing on the details. The image showed a group of beings standing before what appeared to be a spacecraft. They were bipedal, with 2 arms, relatively small in stature compared to the Veldari. Their bodies lacked the elongated proportions of Veldari physiology, instead appearing more compact, more efficient, somehow. Commander, Kelb called, his voice barely above a whisper. I think I found them. The builders. The team gathered around the image, studying it in reverent silence. They look so fragile, one team member finally remarked. How could such beings achieve what they did? The central figure, Kelb said, pointing to what appeared to be the leader of the group. Look at the object they are holding. In the being's hand was a small device, cylindrical in shape, with what appeared to be markings similar to those found throughout the complex. I've seen something like this, Kelby continued, excitement building in his voice. In one of the storage rooms we passed, I thought it was just debris, but a quick return to the room in question confirmed Kelb's suspicion. There, half buried under collapsed ceiling materials, was an object matching the one in the image. The team carefully extracted it, treating the artifact with the reverence normally reserved for religious relics. It appears to be some kind of tool, the technology specialist observed. Or perhaps a weapon. There's a trigger mechanism here. Don't activate it, Thalia ordered sharply. Secure it for transport back to the ship. As the day's exploration drew to a close, and the team prepared to return to their shuttle, the reality of their discovery was beginning to sink in. They had found irrefutable evidence of an advanced civilization that predated the Veldari by hundreds of thousands of years, a civilization that had achieved interstellar travel, established outposts on distant worlds, and then disappeared. Back aboard the shuttle, Commander Talia called the team together for a debrief, before returning to the orbiting indisputable truth. What we've discovered today changes our understanding of galactic history, she began, her voice solemn. The implications reach far beyond archaeology or historical curiosity. This discovery will impact our civilization's self-perception, our cultural identity, and possibly our political structure. Zarax, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their return from the structure, finally spoke. We must consider the possibility that these findings will be unwelcome to certain elements within the Veldari leadership. The precedence theory isn't merely academic. It's the justification for our expansion policies, our resource claims, our political authority within our own systems. Are you suggesting we suppress this discovery? Kelb asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we proceed with caution, Zarex replied, his tone unusually measured. We need absolute verification before presenting these findings. The dating must be confirmed by multiple methods. The technology must be authenticated. We must be certain. And if we are certain, Thalia asked, if all verification confirms what we already strongly suspect, Zorax's tendrils twisted in a complex gesture that conveyed both resignation and determination. Then we present the truth, whatever the consequences. That is our duty as scientists. As the shuttle rejoined with the indisputable truth in orbit, The team transferred their samples and artifacts to the ship's laboratories for more detailed analysis. The data storage devices were placed in containment fields, the mysterious tool-like object was subjected to non-invasive scanning, and the dating process was repeated with enhanced equipment. In the ship's main laboratory, Kelb found himself alone with the recovered artifacts late into the night cycle. The rest of the team had retired, exhausted from the day's discoveries and emotional upheaval, but Kelb found sleep impossible. He kept returning to the image of the strange bipedal beings standing proudly before their spacecraft. Who were they? Where had they come from? And perhaps most hauntingly, what had happened to them? As he pondered these questions, idly scanning through the visual records they had collected from the structure, something caught his attention, a symbol recurring throughout the complex that seemed oddly familiar. He cross-referenced it with the ship's database and found a match that sent a chill down his elongated spine. The symbol appeared in ancient rock formations on the Veldari homeworld. Formations that had always been assumed to be natural, but had occasionally puzzled geologists due to their regular patterning. With growing excitement, Kelb expanded his search. The proportions and measurements used throughout the ancient structure followed mathematical principles that appeared with subtle variations in the earliest Veldari architectural works. Certain technological concepts that the Veldari had discovered in their early development seemed to echo principles evident in the ancient structure's design. The implications were staggering. These beings, these mysterious predecessors, hadn't merely visited this forgotten world. Their influence appeared to extend to the Veldari homeworld itself. Had they visited there too? Had they perhaps done more than visit? The question that now burned in Kelb's mind was far more profound and disturbing than the matter of who had been first to achieve spaceflight. Had the Veldari's entire civilization been built upon a foundation laid by these ancient visitors? And if so, were the Veldari the inheritors of this legacy, or merely the latest in a cycle of rising and falling galactic civilizations? As the indisputable truth continued its orbit around the silent planet below, Kelb stared out at the stars and wondered how many other forgotten outposts lay waiting in the darkness, and whether somewhere, somehow, the builders still existed, watching their cosmic descendants stumble upon the breadcrumbs they had left behind. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, and the joke, much to the Veldari's dismay, was on them. The morning cycle aboard the indisputable truth arrived with the subtlety of a ceremonial gong, blaring alerts and automated systems humming to life, as if the ship itself was stretching after a good night's sleep. Kelb hadn't slept. His findings demanded immediate attention. "You're suggesting what exactly?" Commander Talia asked, her tendrils twitching with the agitation of someone who hasn't had their morning stimulant. The senior staff had assembled in the conference room, surrounded by holographic projections of Kelb's overnight discoveries. The mood wavered somewhere between academic curiosity and existential dread. "The evidence suggests," Kelb explained, "that these beings, whoever they were, visited the Veldari homeworld long before our species achieved sentience." Zirax studied the comparative analysis with uncharacteristic silence. The matching symbols from the ancient structure and Veldari archaeological sites floated before them, rotating slowly like cosmic dominoes about to fall. "This is circumstantial," he finally offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Similar patterns occur naturally throughout the universe. Mathematical principles are universal." "What about the genetic analysis?" Kelb pressed, bringing up another display. "I ran preliminary comparisons between our genome and trace biological materials found in the living quarters." The room fell silent as the results appeared. Certain genetic markers, nothing definitive but unquestionably suggestive, showed similarities that defied random chance. "Are you implying," Plex asked, voice barely above a whisper, "that these beings engineered us?" "Not necessarily," Kelb replied, "but they may have influenced our evolution, guided it perhaps." Commander Thalia, ever practical, cut through the existential quagmire. "These findings must be transmitted to Central Command immediately." "With respect, Commander," Zarax interjected, "we should complete our investigation first. If we're going to upend 15,000 years of Veldari self-perception, we should be absolutely certain." "The tool," Kelb suggested. "If we could determine its function." The mysterious device recovered from the ruins had been secured in the ship's high-security laboratory. Initial scans suggested it contained power sources still active after hundreds of millennia. A technological feat that made Veldari engineering look like children stacking blocks. Under strict containment protocols, the team assembled to examine the device. Plex, the materials specialist, conducted final scans. "It appears to be a data device of some kind," she reported. "The internal structure suggests information storage and projection capabilities. Can we activate it safely?" Thalia asked. "Theoretically," Plex replied with the confidence of someone who definitely wasn't volunteering to push the button. After exhaustive safety preparations, including evacuating all non-essential personnel to a safe distance, the team prepared to activate the ancient device. Kelb, having made the discovery, was granted the dubious honor initiating activation sequence, he announced, manipulating the controls through remote waldos. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hum that seemed to bypass their auditory organs and vibrate directly against their brainstems, the device activated. A holographic projection appeared above it, crisper and more stable than anything Veldari technology could produce. It showed a bipedal being dressed in what appeared to be an environmental suit not dissimilar to their own. The being began to speak, the sounds incomprehensible but clearly language. "Recording translation parameters," the linguistic specialist murmured, equipment capturing every nuance. As the message played, analytical algorithms worked to decipher the language. Gradually, fragments began to make sense, the ship's systems constructing a rudimentary translation. Final outpost in Sector 7, the being's words became clear. "Earth has fallen. The coalition has collapsed. Those of us remaining have implemented the contingency protocol. Seeds have been planted on 17 viable worlds. May they grow in our absence." The translation faltered, then resumed. "To whoever finds this record, we were called humans. We came from a world called Earth in the third spiral arm. We reached the stars 50,000 years ago. We spread across this galaxy and 3 others. We encountered no other intelligent life, but we believed it must exist." Another pause, longer this time. "Our civilization is ending. The cascade cannot be stopped, but perhaps in time new civilizations will rise. Perhaps you who are watching this are our descendants, or perhaps you evolved independently. Either way, know that you were not the first, and if you're fortunate, you won't be the last." The message ended, the hologram flickering out. In its place appeared technical schematics, faster-than-light drive systems, genetic engineering techniques, terraforming methodologies, knowledge beyond Veldari comprehension. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ship's ambient noises seemed muted, as if the universe itself were pausing for breath. "Humans," Xirax finally said, testing the foreign word. "They called themselves humans. They seeded worlds," Talia mused, "including, potentially, ours." "Not just seeds," Kelb said quietly. "Caretakers. The ancient formations on our homeworld, they weren't just symbols. They were monitoring stations. They were watching over us." Over the next 2 days, the team worked feverishly to document and analyze everything from the ruins and the human device. The information contained within was staggering. A library of advanced knowledge that would catapult Veldari civilization forward by centuries, if not millennia. But more profound than the technological revelations was the philosophical impact. The Veldari weren't first. They might, in fact, be the descendants of deliberate intervention by a species so advanced they had spread across multiple galaxies when the Veldari were still primordial microbes. "The Council will resist these findings," Xirax predicted as they prepared their final report. "Too much of our society is built on the precedence theory." "They can resist reality if they wish," Thalia replied. "But facts remain facts regardless." Kelb, who had been studying the human schematics with obsessive intensity, looked up. "There's something else in these files. Coordinates." "Coordinates to what?" Plex asked. "I believe, to Earth. Their homeworld." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. If humans had indeed collapsed as a civilization, their homeworld might contain technological wonders beyond imagination. If they somehow survived, "We should go there," Kelb suggested, surprising even himself with his boldness. Xirax, who a week earlier would have dismissed such a suggestion outright, now nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, we should." Commander Thalia, ever the voice of reason, raised a tendril. "First, we complete our mission here. Then we present our findings to Central Command. Then, perhaps, we explore further." As the indisputable truth broke orbit 3 days later, leaving behind a research outpost to continue studying the human ruins, the Veldari team found themselves irrevocably changed. Their understanding of their place in the cosmic order had been upended. Their presumed uniqueness had been revealed as naive arrogance, and yet there was hope. For if humans had achieved such greatness before falling, perhaps the Veldari could learn from both their triumphs and their mistakes. Kelp stood at the observation deck watching the planet recede into the distance. Somewhere out there among the countless stars lay Earth, and perhaps answers to the questions now burning in his mind. The Veldari had thought themselves the pinnacle of evolution, the first to reach for the stars. Instead, they discovered they were but the latest chapter in a much longer story. The universe, it turned out, had been laughing at their hubris all along.